This is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Nam.
And this is Jamal Dajani.
Jamal, we have a really fantastic and big show today. We're going to be covering a lot of things from war crimes in Israel to singing birds to to a lot of things. But I think we ought to start the show today because the United Nations issued a report basically accusing Israel of committing war crimes in its assaults on Gaza by specifically targeting children and journalists. And this is a UN special report looking at the war crimes that the Israelis have consistently engaged in. And we know, for example, that every Friday, typically, Palestinians in Gaza, in a show of resilience and resistance to this brutal occupation and siege of Gaza, which has been going on past 10 years, mobilize themselves in such a way as to call attention to this illegal siege. What the Israelis have done consistently is fired live ammunition, and you can call it live ammunition, you can call it at times, the quote, rubber-coated bullets, whatever you want to call it, live ammunition targeting children and journalists and medics. And any definition of a war crime, this seems to cover it.
So in general, the investigative commission of the United Nations Human Rights Council,
yes,
that examined the most recent round of violence committed by Israel on the border with Gaza, presented its findings today, saying that it found reasonable grounds, I'm just using their words, that Israeli security forces violated international law. The commission determined that the majority of Gaza protesters were killed by Israeli forces had been unarmed. More than 180 Palestinians were killed just by live ammunition and by snipers by Israel. More than 30 children were killed under the age of 17, not even 18, were targeted and killed. And of course, 2 journalists have been killed and 3 medics.
Well,
so based on this, basically, just I'm saying, based on this, and that's what the title of our show. So based on these facts, Jess, the UN Council determined that Israel has intentionally shot children and journalists in Gaza. And of course, now there's a big brouhaha and they're denying it, but these are facts.
Well, Jamal, this is not, this is, the United Nations, and it's important for us to know this. The United Nations, when they issue reports like this, issue the reports in terms of their narrative statement in very measured language. They're very careful not to sound inflammatory. They're very careful about the language they use. But what isn't changed, Jamal, are the facts. And the facts are children are murdered and shot, journalists are murdered and shot, and medics are targeted, murdered, and shot. And the UN putting this together.
And when you're talking about, I just want to remind our listeners, when you're talking about facts,
these are the facts.
They provided videos. They provided videos of the Israeli snipers shooting unarmed Palestinians, unarmed children, which, by the way, I made a mistake. The commission found that 35 children had been killed directly by snipers for no reason except that they were demonstrating. Of course, everyone remembers the commission also noted that the one case involving a disabled person in a wheelchair, again, under direct fire, of course, were journalists who were clearly just identified as press.
Of course.
They were wearing, vests and written on it that they are press. And there was no justification for firing at children or the disabled or the journalists and of course, the medics who were clearly were visible
as medics.
as medics helping the injured. So this is basically, I mean, these facts lead to war crimes.
Well, as I said, the facts are indisputable. The facts are children are murdered, journalists are murdered, medics are murdered. Children are easily identifiable by the Israeli military. What we have is an attempt yet again, Jamal, because we've received these reports from the United Nations. We've received these reports from multiple NGOs over the years. And here we go again, that the Israeli government and the Israeli military is literally getting away with murder. Now, we have to put it into a larger context. The larger context is that the United States, under this current administration, continues to offer the Israelis and the Israeli government and military cover for these war crimes, for these brutal use of state power against innocent civilians. And so, you know, it's not surprising, I guess, to you or me, to any of our listeners, that when Benjamin Netanyahu, and we'll get to him in a second, when Benjamin Netanyahu heard about this report, he completely dismissed it, and he called the United Nations hypocritical, of course. So here we go again, Jamal. We've been talking about the gross abuses and war crimes that the Israelis have been engaged with for many decades now. This is yet another UN report. My question that identifies, you know, attacks, murders against innocent civilians, against medics, against journalists. My question to you is two questions, actually. When will the world do something about it? And then number two, did we hear any of this on the mainstream media in the last 24 hours?
Well, I'll start by the second question. Of course, no. And then we have to define what's the definition of the word, because you don't hear it here doesn't mean that you don't hear it all over the Middle East and in many European countries and any countries around. I mean, people are aware, especially countries that have journalists on the ground covering. They are eyewitnesses. And again, I repeat the facts that Israel has killed 183 civilians by live ammunition. The fact is 35 of them were children. The fact is 3 medics. The fact is 2 journalists. I mean, you cannot hide your head
behind facts
or bury your head in the sand and pretend that this is not ongoing, except, of course, right here in the United States because of AIPAC and the surrogates of AIPAC and those who work in members of the media who just decide or who have decided that Palestinian lives don't matter.
But I guess that's my point, Jamal. It's part of this narrative that continues to be perpetrated, that Palestinian children lives, or the medics in Palestine, or the journalists who are covering the situation, you know, on the ground in Gaza, their lives do not matter. And the complicity involved with the United States, and specifically the relationship between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, that and Jared Kushner, that kind, and you know, we'll throw MBS in there at the same time, allows for and perpetrates a lawlessness that the Israelis get away with, a lawlessness that the Israelis are able to shoot and kill in this murderous way against civilians who have been suffering under a siege for over 10 years now in Gaza and get away with it. This kind of a lawless mentality where the Israelis, and I guess Trump, and I guess to throw in there MBS, believe that they are somehow above the law, that they can get away with these murderous things.
And they have been getting away.
Well, they have actually. They have been getting away with it. We know they've been getting away with it.
And it doesn't mean that we have to remain silent about these atrocities.
We will not be silent. And I think when we talk about the context of what's happening this week, Jamal, the fact that we started with the UN report alleging these war crimes against the Israelis, where the facts clearly support it. It's occurring in a week where Benjamin Netanyahu, and, I'm really happy to say that one of my 2019 predictions looks like it came true pretty early. I predicted in 2019 that Benjamin Netanyahu would get indicted, and today he was indicted.
That's right.
On bribery, on corruption, and I think one other charge. So maybe, just maybe, there might be some accountability.
Well, I really don't care whether Benjamin Netanyahu gets indicted or not, because he's indicted locally for corruption.
But he'll go to jail.
But to me, he should be indicted for war crimes.
Yes.
And this is the more serious thing for his attack on the civilians in Gaza, for the war on Gaza, for, the settlers, the colonial settlers that he supports, for embracing racist Kahanists into his government. I mean, to me, bribery and stuff, this is a minor misdemeanor compared to his war crimes that he has been committing against Palestinians.
That's right.
And he should be indicted at The Hague.
In the International Criminal Court.
Not just, locally, because we know many of the Israeli officials end up in jail, whether like Katsav he was imprisoned for sexual harassment and rape.
But also Olmert went to jail.
And Olmert for bribery. But they get away with the real...
Well, they get away with murder.
I would say bigger than murder.
Yeah, war crimes.
War crimes.
Yeah.
Against an entire population. So that's the big thing.
But I would like to see Netanyahu spend jail time.
He might get away.
I mean,
you don't know.
Let's put it in the larger context. I mean, we've talked about, for example, how disturbing the unfolding political dynamic has been in the Arab world since Donald Trump has been elected, and this unholy trinity, if you will, with MBS, Netanyahu, and Trump. I mean, truly, truly a disturbing...
Well, Trump said, Netanyahu has been doing a great job. He says
Netanyahu's doing a great job. Jared Kushner's doing a great job. The wall, the Israeli apartheid wall, is doing a great job. He models his idea of the wall on the border with Mexico with the Israeli apartheid wall. But I think this week we're seeing a little sea change, a little shift in the possibility of accountability to at least Netanyahu and Trump, because it is coming to the possibility that accountability is looming over the horizon for both of these individuals. Both of these individuals, whether it's Netanyahu being indicted on corruption and bribery and some other things, or it's Donald Trump, because a bird was singing very loudly in the Congress yesterday and today, singing very loudly about what Donald Trump is truly about, which may lead, Jamal, to some accountability at the level of...
And the bird's name is Michael Cohen. For
Michael Cohen.
Those who are not familiar, Michael Cohen was singing like a bird.
Like a bird.
Yesterday and today, by the way, behind closed doors, but yesterday publicly. What did he describe Trump? A con man, a cheat, and a liar? Or
Well, those were the nice things that he said about Trump. He said a cheat, a con man, and a racist.
And the racist.
Yeah, so he actually broke it down in terms of three separate categories. And, I listened to quite a bit of it. And I have to say that, we should say at the outset that Michael Cohen is an admitted liar. He is going to jail for 3 years. He lied on his taxes. He lied on loan forms. He lied to Congress. He is...
Did he sound credible to you?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
I didn't expect that Michael Cohen would sound credible in any way, stretch, or imagination, but he actually sounded credible for the majority of what he said. I was actually surprised about his level of credibility.
Let me ask you about something which was the most revealing thing that he said.
Which is what?
Well, I want to know if you know what, in your opinion, what was the most revealing statement that he said?
Oh,
And
I think there was
outside
I think
all
there
the
was-
corruption and whatever.
I think there was quite a bit. I think that the thing that he said to me that I found really interesting is that he had information and knowledge that Trump committed other crimes that even the special prosecutor didn't know about.
Yeah, maybe this is a trick question, but
I think it's a trick
it's
question.
a trick question. But no, actually, what I found and the most revealing thing outside the usual, we know that Trump has been lying. The Washington Post, I think, put his
9,000, over 9,000.
8,100 something lies since he came into office. And we know about the corruption. We know about his moral character from taped interviews. We know about the hush money that he paid off, to silence his encounters with women and prostitutes. All these things, I think there were no surprises there, Jess.
They really weren't.
No, but I think what was very interesting, because if you remember, Cohen said that he was there from day one. In fact, it was his idea
That Donald Trump
runs, and he said, and this is a quote from what he said during the hearing, he said, Donald Trump is a man who ran for office to make his brand great, not to make our country great. He had no desire or intention to lead this nation, only to market himself and to build his wealth and power. And then he goes on, basically, which is that Trump never expected or even really wanted to win the 2016 election.
Exactly. He didn't expect to win the election. And that explains in part why he was still negotiating with Trump Tower in Moscow. That explains all of the other things.
Why he wasn't prepared.
Why he wasn't prepared.
He had,
and all of that.
He said he was going to bring the best team.
Right.
Right.
He had no expectation whatsoever that he was going to win. And that's why, and if you think about it, he has said on a couple of occasions, Jamal, I didn't know if I was going to win. That's why I continued to do deals because, business goes on. But what he didn't tell the American public about is that he was actively negotiating with arguably the biggest international threat to U.S. Interests in the world, which is Russia. And he was actively engaged with not just negotiating the Trump deal, but Trump and people around Trump, including Roger Stone, including Michael Cohen, including Jared Kushner, were meeting with Russians, and not just any Russians, but Russians associating with the Russian mafia and associated with Vladimir Putin. Things that he denied.
They had one of the, I don't know if he was a former Russian mafia or was still a Russian mafia. He had his office on the 26th floor of
Same floor with Trump.
Trump Tower.
Same
two
floor.
doors down from Trump.
2 doors down on the 26th floor, yeah. So he was actually, was that, I think that was Felix Sater, right? Was that Felix? Yeah, Felix Sater.
And this is what Michael Cohen, I mean, he revealed so much, but there is still a lot to learn, really. That's why he was saying things are still under investigation.
Yeah, the Southern District of New York still.
So I think we're going to find out even more and more things that it's going to make your hair stand.
Yeah. So let me just bring it back. We'll spend a little more time on that in a minute, Jamal, but we want our listeners and people who have any doubt whatsoever about this connection between Donald Trump and U.S. foreign policy and Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli policy. And we have to understand in this very critical way, and this is why Rashida Tlaib, this is why Ilhan Omar, this is why the real progressive arm of the Democrats are getting hammered, because they're going to the heart of the issue of the profoundly immoral, unethical, illegal, antithetical to U.S. interests, U.S. relationship with the State of Israel. That this has to be challenged, this has to be looked at. the relationship with AIPAC to our electoral system, our foreign policy, where we're giving Israelis and the Israeli government over $3.5 billion a year. How, as we've talked about on this show, Jamal, how people can donate and get tax deductions, can donate to charitable organizations that are giving money to illegal settlers that are using that money to live on stolen land and to basically kill Palestinians. So the interconnection between Trump world and Israel and Trump world and Netanyahu world, the interconnectedness has to be exposed. And I think we saw little bits and pieces of it this week, Jamal.
Well, we've been talking about this topic. We've been talking about it with Dr. Rabab Abdelhadi. We've been talking about it, exposing, for example, the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco.
Which is outrageous.
And the budget of $300 million that they've spent to basically buttress racist organizations, Islamophobic organizations, targeting people who criticize Israel, targeting pro-Palestinian professors, academics, students right here in the United States. Imagine $300 million they've spent. But since we are on this topic, and we're going to dedicate an entire hour to it next week with Dr. Hatem Bazian from UC Berkeley. I'm just going to give our listeners a taster of what's going on.
That's a big story,
and I think
Jamal.
This is a big thing because for the very first time now, Jess, we've been exposing these things on this show for the past couple of years. And other publications and other media outlets like the J Forward, the Electronic Intifada and others, they've discussed this topic. But this is the first time today, and I urge our listeners to check it out. It's in the New Yorker. So this topic...
Wait a minute. The New Yorker?
In the New Yorker, it's going mainstream.
Wow.
There's an article called, how a private Israeli intelligence firm spied on pro-Palestinian activists in the U.S.
Who's the author?
The author is Adam Entus.
Wow.
And this is in today's New Yorker or maybe yesterday's, but anyway, it's hot off the press. And they discuss...
Can you give us some highlights?
An example,
give us some highlights.
That's why we're going to be having Dr. Hatem Bazian right here in the studio, because he was one of the main characters who have been targeted. And we talked to him on this show about what happened. But now, since it has come out to be a mainstream event, right, Jess, he's going to come and talk about it more. But imagine, early, and this is from the article, and I'm reading some excerpts from the article, and then early on the morning of May 10, 2017, as Dr. Bazian was about to drive his teenage daughter to school, he noticed flyers on the windshields of cars parked on his block. At first, Bazian assumed that they were advertisements for a new movie or restaurant. When he looked more closely at the flyer that had been left on his car, basically, he realized that it featured a photograph of his face below a tagline that read, "He supports terror." Bazian quickly folded up the flyer so his daughter wouldn't see it.
It's terrible, man.
So of course, this is, and he's been targeted on campus. They went all the way to his home, to his neighborhood, because he is an outspoken critic of Israel and Israeli occupation and atrocities. And he's also, supports the BDS movement, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement, otherwise known as BDS. And so, aside from all these different, like we know Campus Watch and we know Canary Mission, whatever, this was different. Why? Because they went, meaning they, now we know that they have private Mossad. This is what we call them.
Right.
The private Mossad agents.
Right.
PSYOP. PSYOP groups.
Which is short for psychological operations.
Yes.
Which means that they hire former Mossad agents to psychologically manipulate people, communities, and stories in the media.
And we know more.
We do.
Because in 2016, the PSYOP group held discussions with the Trump campaign and others about conducting covert influence operations to benefit the candidate, then Donald Trump.
Surprise, surprise.
It's the same group, and this PSYOP group founder, so we have more information, and CEO Roy Burstian, a veteran Israeli intelligence officer who established the firm in 2014. Now,
what a surprise.
He's been behind all of this, right?
Same psychological manipulation.
And he has attracted, by the way, the attention of Robert Mueller. So this is going to come in the investigation. But anyway, bringing it here, the PSYOP group operation against BDS activists on U.S. college campuses began in February 2016, according to internal documents describing the campaign. His company raised money, guess from where? In New York from Jewish American donors and pro-Israel groups, and assured them that their identities would be kept secret while issuing them tax deduction forms.
Sounds familiar, Jamal.
Right?
Sounds familiar.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about this for the past 2 years.
And you know what's ironic about that, Jamal? Let me just say what's ironic about that. When we've brought this up, people think we're conspiracy theorists. People think that we're making things out of thin air. Yet here is, we like to, rely a lot on independent journalists. But, the New Yorker is not an independent journalist operation. It's a mainstream, traditional journalistic, operation. And for them to come out and really identify the same sources that we have. I mean, they did it 2 years late, but that's okay. Identifying the same things that we've been saying for years and years is rather remarkable.
So this campaign,
it's
now
really
which we know,
remarkable.
codenamed Project Butterfly, initially targeted BDS activists on college campuses. This is according to one of their former employees who told the writer at the New Yorker, right? So this is not, hearsay. This is from someone who
on the inside,
who was on the inside. And then, of course, then they go on other things, including some cases this group conducted on-the-ground covert human intelligence and others, or human, yeah. In other words, following people. In other words, like if they want to find out, this is how they found out where Dr. Bazian lives. They can follow him from campus, know where he lives, go into his neighborhood, and so forth. So they were conducting, these are Israeli agents.
Israeli citizens.
Israeli Mossad agents.
Right.
Former or not former, because I don't believe in this former.
There's no former.
Once you are in the Mossad, you're always in the Mossad. Following these people, targeting, learning more about where they live, where they go, etc. And then, they are coordinating with the Mossad and with Israeli intelligence and with the IDF, providing names. So those activists, when they land at Ben Gurion Airport and they get arrested and they held in a room,
and they wonder where they got
their names, including, by the way, members of Jewish Voice for Peace and human rights organizations and United Nations employees and so forth. They are gathering this information, feeding it to the Israeli, authorities and the Israeli intelligence, and then working on to defame these people in their own neighborhood. Before it was on the net, but now they take it all the way to their homes to spread fear. When you wake up in the morning with your young daughter and all of a sudden,
you see that, yeah.
You're associated. So it's a bigger story than what we even started.
Yeah, you're right, Jamal. It's a bigger story, but I want to point to that human intelligence, or HUMINT, and the PSYOPs, or psychological operations, that Mossad-driven Israeli project is basically the same thing, and this is why Robert Mueller's involved, I believe, the same techniques used by the Russian, hacker organizations to influence the 2016 election of Donald Trump, to demonize Hillary Clinton, even though she had plenty to be critical of, but the ways in which they infiltrated the social media sites, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. These are the same techniques, Jamal. These are the same techniques to manipulate people's perceptions, to manipulate stories, to manipulate and create fear in anybody who speaks negatively or who speaks critically or who has their own mind about an analysis about what the Israeli military or political system is doing in their occupation of Palestine. So this story by the New Yorker, Adam Entus, who's, quite an excellent reporter, so this is kind of a big deal. We want to talk about this because we're going to have Professor Bezian with us next week to talk about it live. I mean, can you imagine going to your car in the morning and taking your daughter to school and seeing a poster or a flyer with your face on it saying, this is a terrorist, he lives in your neighborhood?
I mean, it's beyond like just putting for many years, academics and students and activists had their names on Canary Mission. So
This is
aside
different.
from someone Googling your name and then finding your name
This is different.
associated with terror or something like that, but now they're going to your neighborhood, now they're trailing you, now they're spying on you, now they're feeding this information to Israeli intelligence and making up stories all over, trying to get you fired from work, and which we know about these things, but also connecting the dots, because this brings me back locally. It's kind of like all politics
Is local,
right? About one of the largest Jewish charities in the United States, right here in San Francisco.
That's right.
And we've invited them many times to come on this show.
Many times.
And explain, send their representative. I'm extending this invitation again, and tell us why for the past 10 years they've spent $300 million funding Canary Mission, funding
David
Horowitz, funding Campus Watch, funding colonial settlers in Hebron, an organization called Ir David, right?
Yeah.
And now we have this issue here. So now, even though this is the tip of the iceberg, why would I be surprised if they're not also funding this Israeli spy agency? Because they all have the same mission,
Right.
to basically spread hate, targeting Palestinians.
No, Americans.
And targeting pro-Palestinian activists.
American citizens.
And professors at universities, especially in prominent universities like Dr. Hatem Bazian at UC Berkeley. They gave in 2016, we have it on paper, $100,000 for the Canary Mission, which is a shady website operating out of Israel, by the way. They got one of the most reputable, I was shocked, foundations, the Helen Diller Foundation, which has a plaque right around the corner from our studio right here on Divisadero at UCSF, Mount Zion
Cancer Center,
because they donate millions of dollars. But then Helen Diller gives money to Canary Mission.
Unbelievable.
To defame young students.
Right.
At San Francisco State University.
Right.
At UC Berkeley.
And all over the country.
All over the country. And they've been quiet because we've been raising this issue for 2 years. And we say, if we're wrong, come tell us right here on this show.
But they haven't.
That you haven't been funding hate groups. You haven't been funding terror groups who are Kahanists, who live in Hebron, who admired Meir Kahana, who is considered a terrorist.
Even by the United States.
Who admire Baruch Goldstein, who slaughtered Palestinian worshippers in Hebron. And come and explain yourself.
You have an open invitation.
But last and not least, Jess, They have been cheating the U.S. taxpayers because they have been issuing tax deductions, and they should be investigated by the U.S. Treasury Department.
That's, you know what, Jamal? You took the words right out of my mouth. The immorality, the unbelievableness, the attacks on U.S. citizens, all terrible. But what I don't understand, how can the U.S. government give them cover from a tax collection standpoint? People are
And I tell you how.
I don't know how they're doing it.
And I'm going to tell you how.
Where is the IRS?
And I'm going to tell you how. And this is the difference between the United States, because we talked about this, and Canada, because Canada is investigating a similar organization with the same mission statement, with the same illegal activities, because it was issuing tax deductions to Canadian citizens to fund basically terror groups and hate groups. Because right here, the law, it's not against the law to donate to a foreign country, to Israel or a foreign institution, wherever. But what's against the law if you donated to an organization which is on the State Department terror list?
That's right.
So until these groups are put, and they should be justifiably so, when you are funding kahanists who have blood on their hands, then you should be liable for this.
But aren't some on the terror list?
And when actually this is new. In fact, yes, the Meir Kahana group, they've changed their name, by the way. They don't go by this name. Now they've kind of splintered in other organizations. They are on the terrorist. Canara Mission is not on the terrorist. Or David, which is basically all Kahanis there, is not on the terrorist. So someone has to do his or her homework and provide proof and evidence. So the U.S. the U.S. Treasury in this fact. First, the U.S. State Department has to put them on the list, and the Treasury has to question this. What is your mission statement? If your mission statement is promoting culture, education, and health, and you're giving people, exemptions because you are a 501c3 organization, and you're not adhering to your mission statement, but you're actually funding groups to spread Islamophobia and hate, and actually, in fact, you're funding groups who are murderers,
right?
Then you should be investigated.
Well, Jamal, I have a theory about that. And, I've been thinking about this a long time, and I have a theory. I actually believe that the Helen Diller Foundation and the JCRC and these collectives that promote and give money to like UCSF and other community organizations, I actually believe that's their front, that they've created a front, like a money laundering front. And the front is, we're going to do some of these good things to these organizations that are seen in the community as well-deserving, and some are. But then behind the scenes, the real mandate here, the real driving force, is to create these funding streams for these hateful, immoral, and, in my humble opinion, illegal entities that are designed to attack people, to use former Israeli PSYOPs, experts to instill fear. So I actually think that these are front groups, Jamal. It's a typical money laundering opportunity. They're getting tax-exempt status.
Can you imagine they've been getting away with this?
For decades.
For decades.
Decades.
Don't tell me that the U.S. government, the FBI, other intelligence agencies...
No, they know about it.
Don't know about it. But now, since it's making a connection, especially with this Israeli Mossad spy agency, and it's connected to the Mueller investigation, with the elections and Donald Trump, they can connect the two, that this is larger. This is like an entity. It's actually should be registered in this country as foreign agents, and they're literally getting away with murder, ruining people's lives in this country.
The other connection, Jamal, we spoke about it a number of months ago. I don't know if it's the same firm. It may well be. but Harvey Weinstein hired a former Israeli
It
Mossad.
did. Actually, it's also connected to
It's
this.
connected. What Harvey Weinstein
They
did.
hire basically spies and thugs.
Yeah, but listen what Harvey Weinstein did. Harvey Weinstein, for decades, was sexually assaulting, actors and actresses, and basically raping women and getting away with it. Finally called to account under the, Me Too movement. So what did Harvey Weinstein do? He hires the same Israeli psyops firms to follow these actresses, to dig up dirt, to create fake news and fake stories about them, to make them so fearful that they either drop their case or that their reputation is smeared. It's the same thing that, they did with these pro-Palestinian activists, Jamal, with these students who are fighting for justice in Palestine. It's the same M.O.
You're listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. And also, you're seeing us, we're streaming live on Facebook.
Jamal Dejani too,
Facebook.
Facebook.
I want to welcome you all for joining us, those who have joined us late. But also, Jess, here's another thing, right? The spread goes beyond, and I'm talking about these organizations, these so-called nonprofit organizations defrauding the American taxpayer. It spreads beyond this country. Imagine.
Oh, absolutely.
When I was looking at their 990 schedule, which I have a copy of it,
Which they have to submit to the IRS.
they have to submit to it, they have donated money. I was thinking, what do they have to do with Dutch Geert Wilders? Do you know who's Dutch?
Well, that's the
Politician
yeah.
Geert Wilders?
He's one of the most racist, anti-immigrant Islamophobes. He's the leading Islamophobe in the EU right now.
They gave him money in 2015.
For what?
This is basically, he campaigned against the Islamization of his country
Of
and
Holland,
stopping
yeah.
all Muslim immigration, promoted legislation that would ban the Quran in the Netherlands, and being called an anti-Muslim bigot by the ADL.
Yeah, the ADL called him that.
They called him this, and then they're funneling money
To him at the same
to
time.
him,
Yeah,
money that is donated right here in this country,
in San Francisco.
in San Francisco, to him. Then I looked again, and of course we mentioned Canary Mission. They tried to hide that under another organization called Megamot Shalom. So it sounds very benign. Shalom means peace, right? and basically, this organization gives its money to Canary Mission to defame people like Hatem Bazian, Dr. Hatem Bazian, Dr. Rabab Abdel Hadi, and others, right? And then the Helen Diller, with this reputation of supporting UCSF right here around the corner, they got them involved, basically taking money through grants from the Helen Diller Foundation, which is a great foundation. I mean, it helps school,
It's
it
a
helps
front.
hospitals.
It's a front.
But then at the same time, they're giving money to terror groups.
Yeah,
and,
I think,
and
Jamal,
hate mongers.
I'm sorry, Jamal. I just think it's a front. I
They
really
gave
do.
$150,000 in 2016, Jess, to the Tea Party Patriots.
Well, that's
Very-
yeah, because they're supporting the Trump agenda, and just so that our listeners know, the reason they give money to the Tea Party patriots, because the Tea Party patriots are the ones who have worked the hardest for the Trump agenda. So it's all part of the same kind of political agenda and psyops and human intelligence that they're going to fund anything that supports the maintenance of the Israeli apartheid system, the murderous Israeli apartheid system.
Another group funded by
Diller.
Diller, group funded by Diller, let's see if you're surprised, but I'm sure you won't, is the American Freedom Defense Initiative,
I'm not surprised.
also known as Stop Islamization of America, which was
Isn't that-
created by Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller.
Yeah.
You know, to oppose the alleged spread of Islamic law across the United States. $150,000 in 2014.
What?
And remember, everyone in San Francisco, that's why I keep bringing it back locally to San Francisco. They were meeting with city officials and Muni to stop those hate ads that were
That's right.
appearing on Muni, paid by Pamela Geller. And little did we know that they received their money right around the corner, right here from
Helen Diller.
right here in San Francisco, in the Bay Area.
So we are inviting anybody from the Helen Diller Foundation, anyone from the JCRC, anybody from the foundation, the Jewish Foundation group that is funding these hate groups and funding these, literally hate crimes, in Palestine. We invite you in the spirit of telling us your mission, tell us your vision, and just tell us in what universe of the world are you thinking that you want to fund these hate groups. Help us understand. Are we missing something? We invite you to come on Arab Talk anytime. We'll give you an opportunity to speak. We'll engage with the dialogue with you. But this is truly a remarkable story. I want to remind you, Jamal, about the Holy Land Fund, the Holy Land 8, that,
Yeah, they were based in Texas, right?
They were based in Texas. This is a Muslim organization that was raising money to basically, feed orphans and feed poor Muslims all around the world, including those in Palestine. Long story short, that because of the Patriot Act, they were shut down as a 501c3, and 8 of these Holy Land board members are rotting in jail right now without any opportunity of parole for sending money to organizations that are less hateful, less violent, and organizations.
So why this double standard?
That's what I'm asking you, Jamal.
Why do we have this?
Well, we know why.
Why? But our listeners don't know why.
Well, our listeners who have been paying attention to us understand that the real psyops here has been AIPAC and pro-Israeli forces who have gotten Americans to believe in these fictions, in these irrealities, in these fantasies about Israel. And they've built this fantasy about Israel being a democracy, being the only democracy, being the country that made the desert bloom, all these complete fabrications and lies, Jamal, that they have been creating for decades now.
And they spend hundreds of millions of dollars.
Billions of dollars to coerce people into this fantasy about Israel. And through organizations like AIPAC, let's just call it what it is, have made every single politician in the United States, except for Ilham Omar and Rashida Tlaib and hopefully AOC, have made every other politician in the world afraid to speak their mind. That's
if they were afraid to speak their mind, that's one thing. But they're actually their own surrogates. They're their own mouthpieces. Basically, I mean, if they don't say anything and they're afraid, I'll give them a pass.
Right.
But they actually, like Marco Rubio, he might as well just work for AIPAC.
He might as well, or work for the Knesset.
I mean, this is the scary thing. We have few minutes left.
Oh, we only have a few minutes
so we have
left.
to make an announcement. But also, I want you to comment a little bit about this great trip that Trump is having or just finishing in Vietnam, meeting with the North Korean leader that was going to disarm North Korea. And so,
in case our listeners didn't know, Jamal, Donald Trump, one of his secret fantasies is to win the Nobel Prize for Peace, Nobel Peace Prize.
He said that.
He's been nominated by Prime Minister Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, who was told by Trump to do it, by the way. And the coup de grace, if you will, of this becoming the Nobel Peace Prize is to create a nuclear disarmament peace plan between North Korea, the United States, and the rest of the world. unfortunately, for Donald Trump, who is at best completely outplayed again by Kim Jong-un, cut the meeting short because they could not get an agreement from the North Koreans to disarm.
So where do we go from there?
Well, where we go is Kim Jong-un has scored yet another major political victory. He's met with President Trump twice. The United States gets nothing in return. The sanctions continue. But Kim Jong-un has two aces in his pocket. He has the relationship with China, which is very strong. He has a relationship to Russia, which is very strong.
And he's been praised by Donald Trump as a great person, a good
he has
man.
been praised. So it's a major coup for Kim Jong-un, who comes out again as a winner and unfortunately makes the United States and Donald Trump look like a fool that he is when it comes to these foreign policy issues. It was really, I mean,
It was embarrassing.
It was
really.
embarrassing. But the only good thing is he didn't sign a deal. I mean, that's the good news because he would have
Sign a deal on what?
That's my point. They had a whole ceremony planned, Jamal.
They were like gonna give financial aid to North Korea,
Yes.
and they're gonna
Yes.
make it into this great
Another Vietnam.
high tech, power in Asia and so forth.
I think this has been a bad week for Donald Trump. And, Jamal, I'm happy to say this gives me confidence that my other prediction that Jared Kushner will be indicted, I feel
I think
supported by
Donald Trump Jr. might get indicted.
Yeah, because
before,
based on what
according to the
Michael
Mike
Cohen
Cohen.
said, I think the whole Trump family is in trouble. Hey, thanks for joining us today, everybody. We always appreciate our listeners. We want to thank you for joining us on Arab Talk. You can check us out on our website, ArabTalkRadio.com.
And you could check us on Facebook, Jamal Dajani 2. We are on SoundCloud. We are on iTunes. Just go to our website.
You can
All
find
this
everything.
information is there.
Thank you, and we'll see you next week.